I just want you guys to take a moment to take a look at our screens. We're opening up our presentation with just a reminder of how awesome our drivers and our frontline workers have been throughout the 2020 COVID pandemic. And we put together a little bit of a slideshow just to show how our communities and how our customers and our littlest, biggest fans have supported us through this whole year that we never thought we would ever experience. So just take a moment.
I could sing.
And as you can see, these pictures were all a combination of all of our members and our suppliers throughout this whole year. Just a reminder that we are beloved in our community, especially our drivers. As you can see, the kids got really creative, really creative. But I think it meant a lot. It meant a lot to the drivers.
It would stink. It does feel like church, Peggy.
Paying tribute to the front line.
But it's a great mix of our manufacturers, our cart people, our, the haulers, the small guys to the bigger guys, all of our drivers, even the National Waste and Recycling Association, reminded how important the drivers are and their daily job, and not only their daily job, but how they could stay safe and go home to their families and get up the next day and do it again. Mm-hmm. Yep. we just want to say thank you to all of the everyday heroes out there and their hard work and devotion to keep us safe. And I want to introduce myself. My name is Katie Rafferty Evans, and I am with Best Way Disposal. I also serve as the Vice President and Professional Development Chair for the National Waste and Recycling Women's Council. Thanks for joining us today. For nearly 2 decades ago, the NWRA Women's Council was formed by like-minded industry professionals dedicated to advancing and promoting the waste and recycling industry, along with giving back to our members and their companies through education, networking, professional development, and the award of our scholarships. A huge thank you goes out to our member companies who have donated to our scholarship program. Because of their generosity, this year, the Women's Council was awarded $40,000 in scholarships. This year alone highlights a massive milestone for the Women's Council, awarding over $300,000 in scholarships since 2007. So let's give a round of applause. And for a moment, can we have all of our Women Council members and board please stand up? And please take a moment to connect with some of our members today. They're out and about. They are within the industry and working hard. And also, ask them about tickets because we are selling tickets for a Split the Pot chance. And this ticket will be pulled today at 3:30 p.m. at booth 2071. And the best part is you do not have to be there to win it. So, I mean, you could be by the pool, you could be out talking about, but you could still be going home with some money and not losing it in Vegas. So, today's super session is an excellent example of the work accomplished by my Women Council colleagues. We have an inspiring session in store which will be moderated by my co-chair, my good friend and mentor, and a 2020 inductee to the NWRA Hall of Fame, Kathy Trent. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie, and thank you to everyone coming this morning to enjoy this panel. I have my pleasure to introduce our members. Our first member is Heather Stalvey. Heather is Vice President of Human Resources and Administration for the Environmental Solutions Group. Heather leads a world-class team at ESG focused on the best practices of candidate, employee, and leader experience, utilizing her forward-looking and technology-leveraging approach in employee relations, talent and leadership development, workforce planning and succession, talent acquisition, communications, total rewards, legal and compliance, payroll, and immigration. Prior to ESG, Heather's professional experience spanned global industries in power generation and Tier 1 automotive with Alstom, General Electric, Denso, and TRW. Heather obtained her MBA from Auburn University and her BS in Business Administration from the University of Tennessee. Amanda Mickelson is Vice President of Human Resources for Oshkosh Corporation's commercial segment, which is comprised of industry-leading brands such as McNeilus, IMT, London Machinery, Oshkosh S-Series since October 2018. In addition to leading the full spectrum of HR activities for the segment, she oversees environmental health and safety. Amanda has over 20 years of HR experience working previously for General Electric and Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. She is a graduate of the University of Minnesota, Carlson School of Management, Master's Program in Human Resources and Industrial Relations. Shweta Curvy Mishra is with Waste Management. She's the Vice President of Organizational and Talent Development. In Shweta's current role with Waste Management, she's leading the strategy, design, and execution of the company's talent management, leadership development, and learning and development functions, ensuring that talent is a strategic lever for our business. Shweta started her HR career in talent acquisition, in high-impact roles in the field, corporate as well as business partnership and centers of excellence. Prior to Waste Management, she led the HR function and developed a long-term business-driven talent strategy as the VP of HR for Silver Eagle Distributors. Shweta earned her bachelor's in commerce from Mumbai University, and she has 2 masters from Michigan State University in organizational communication and human resources and labor relations. Sue Netherton is the Vice President of People, Training, and Development of Waste Connections. From 1994 to 2007, Sue held various human resources positions at Carpenter Technology Corporation, a publicly traded specialty metals and materials company. Sue holds a BS in elementary education from Kutztown University and an MBA from St. Mary's College of California. Well, as you can see, we have very talented individuals here today, and I think you're going to enjoy the very different perspectives that each of them are bringing to the very important topic to all of our businesses. How are we dealing with our employees, and what does the outlook look like? So let's get to it. I have several questions that the panel will have a discussion on, and then there will be time at the end for each of you to think of a question you might want to ask these talented folks. So let's have a lot of involvement as we close out the session today. But to begin with, question 1. Now, a lot of us have been dealing with COVID and emergency order restrictions. Last year, we were prominently reminded of just how essential our industry's mission and purpose are in our every community across North America. During this time, many companies were forced to pivot towards a new, uncharted work environment for their employees. However, our essential workers, our drivers, our technicians, they still had to perform their traditional service roles. So how did your company develop and maintain confidence with that continuous shifting of federal and state emergency order restrictions, moving employees from the office to home to back to the office, and maintain that trust with employees who reported every day to work? I think, Sue, you have some opening comments you'd like to share.
Thanks, Kathy. You know, like you started, this was probably one of the most difficult years most of us have experienced. And really our approach was to really focus on our frontline employees and really just go back to what we do every day, which is our culture and our values, and let that guide our decision-making through COVID. So we decided to put in some kind of company-wide policies to support our employees, to make sure that they could take care of their families, which obviously there was so much fear and uncertainty at the beginning. We wanted them to know that we had their backs and they were going to be able to take care of their families first. So we started with basically a wage program so that if anyone was home because of COVID, whether they were exposed or they were sick or they were taking care of someone in the family, we covered their wages, and we did that for our entire frontline workforce. We really didn't put much of a limit on it because we knew our frontline leaders would make the right decisions for the right families. In addition to that, we added additional pay, and we went as far as basically just making it a broad policy. Our union employees, our non-union employees, we actually went out to our major temporary labor vendors and provided additional pay to our temporary employees as well. In addition, we did bonuses, and we treated our folks, whether they were at home working on customer service versus out picking up the trash, the same. and helped everyone. The way that we dealt with the constant shift is really just to use our decentralized model. Our leaders out in the field have a lot of autonomy on how to run their businesses in their local market. So we let them have guidance, safety protocols, programs, and then we let them make the decisions locally that worked best in those markets. So they were able to keep up with the changes in the state and the changes in the provinces. So that worked well for us.
I think that's true, and I know, Shweta, you shared a lot of those same type of activities.
Yeah, so similar to what Sue shared, at Waste Management, we want our commitments and values to drive everything that we do. And one of our first commitments is to be a people-first company. And we really put our money where our mouths are when we talk about people first, because this pandemic gave us an opportunity to really think about what that meant for waste management. So similar to Sue's company, we offered a 40-hour backstop to all our frontline employees and others. So if their work was reduced due to the pandemic, they were guaranteed a 40-hour wage for all our employees. We also wanted to think about people first in a holistic way. So this wasn't just about financial well-being, it was also about emotional well-being, it was mental health well-being. So we increased our offerings for our employee assistance programs. We created circles for our managers to make sure they knew how to lead during this pandemic and during the stressful time. We expanded our program for emergency childcare services. So we partnered with Bright Horizons, and frontline workers were coming to work and schools were closed, daycares were closed. So we expanded our benefit for childcare services. And we wanted to make sure that our safety protocols were kept front and center. So we created the framework, and similar to Sue's process, we allowed the businesses the flexibility within that framework. But we did not want to have inconsistent experiences across, and we wanted to make sure that we had our employees' backs. And that's what we did for our frontline. And for our office employees, we went through a true job evaluation exercise where we rated every single job, office-based job, across 16 criteria and created designations. So post-pandemic, we had about 55% of our office-based jobs that are going to be remote forever. I say forever, facetiously. 30% of our jobs are hybrid, so both office and remote. And then 20% of our jobs are going to be office-based. And so what that created was additional flexibility, additional peace of mind for our employees to make sure that they are taking care of their full lives. And that's what People First meant for waste management, is to think about holistic well-being, financial, mental, professional, and that's kind of how we operated in the pandemic world.
I think that's very true. I think you have to take care of the whole person. Any other thoughts from our panel members on that one? I do want to say I'd like to give a shout out to the association. Daryl and his staff were instrumental in making sure that our businesses at the state level and at the local level really knew what emergency orders were out there. They were very effective in securing our business as an essential business at the national level, which then helped us at the state level. I can't tell you how many phone calls I have participated on with Peggy Messinas, the staff member, and other association members. So while we all had to deal internally with our company structures and how to figure that out, the association did step up and help us dramatically make sure that our business was deemed essential, and that did follow and float down to the state level. The second question I think all of us have to deal with as we look at our employment for our companies is labor and CDL shortages. So let's talk about that topic, ladies. Recently, Daryl Smith, the NWRA president and CEO, stated, "The waste and recycling industry has experienced a growing labor shortage over the past several years, particularly when it comes to hiring individuals with commercial driver licenses. How does your organization uniquely think about attracting and retaining talent in today's workforce with today's labor shortages? And can you share maybe your innovative approach to your companies and how they examined it and what they're implementing today to meet those needs? And I think, Amanda, you had some initial points you wanted to share.
Sure, I can start us off. So being McNeilis, we don't need CDLs, of course, but really the labor shortage is impacting us as well. And one thing I would say is we're kind of in a difficult situation because the competition for CDLs has actually come into the market or the manufacturing space as well, and made it a little bit challenging for us to retain some of our talent. But really the guiding principle, I would say, from a McNeilis standpoint about how we think about this labor shortage, which for us in southeastern Minnesota is something we've been dealing with for a very long time, is really to focus on retention. So the types of ways that we've been, things we've been investing in has been increased orientation and onboarding, a much more robust training offering. We're lucky to have some new training facilities in the last couple of years, and really just working really hard to have a positive, culture, a positive environment, kind of like everyone is talking about. The culture is really key in retaining all of our team members. I'd say one of the more forward-looking things that we've been doing is working to build out stronger career pathing for all of our positions, both on the office side in all the different functional areas, but as well in the manufacturing areas as well. So we recently launched that, and that is also really focused on retention. We want to bring in these people, train them up, and let them advance their careers and advance their pay by staying with us and learning more. So that's just a few ideas.
And I think, Heather, we were talking this morning some of the unique ways that ESG is actually helping the labor problem. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think we need to look at it from two parts. First, I would say the retention of the current people that we have, but also all of you, how many of you have had more issues with labor post-COVID than before? Okay, so pretty much everybody, right? So this isn't a new problem, but I think it has been kind of exacerbated by the fact that COVID made it very difficult for us to get people to work. One of the things from an ESG perspective that we're thinking about is whether you're an independent hauler, you're national, you're a dealer, how do we get your drivers up to speed faster with the products and services that we make? So again, looking at it from your all's perspective. And then also, how do we make it more enjoyable for them? And I think about things like with Cab Shake. Can we make it to where the drivers are not completely exhausted by the end of the day? So with the new command arm, we're saying, okay, can we make this easier and better for the driver? Same thing I would mention like Halo. How many of you think I can drive a garbage truck? Any of you think I can drive a garbage truck? Well, guess what? I can now because now we actually have Halo. So I can get in, all I have to do, I have a heads-up display, I push a button, it does all the work for me, and I'm good. Those are the kind of things that you all are going to need because we need to kind of remove the fear and actually say, listen, anyone can be a driver in our industry. We need to open our minds to think that more people could come in and do this, but we've got to provide the products and services that are going to allow you to do that. I would say on the flip side, when we're talking about tactics, many of you probably hear the buzz terms about diversity and inclusion. Some may have attended the session yesterday when we were talking about the work release programs and some of the wonderful things that our industry is doing. I would say think even broader. Many of you have employees that are really stuck, especially post-COVID, with you've got kids at home, you're dealing with elder care. Have you thought about part-time options? Have you thought about expanding? I think you talked about the remote working, and maybe we kind of vary it depending on the person's situation. How do we open the talent pools and the talent view to where we really consider some of those people that we have not considered in the past for whatever reason?
I think those were great points, and I think, Shraddha, you were also going to comment on that, I think.
Yeah, so, let's be honest, the CDL shortage is not a waste industry issue, right? The CDL shortage is globally, everybody's facing it. And so the way we are thinking about it at Waste Management is what are the immediate short-term things we can do? What are some things we can consider? And what are some macro options we can look at? So in the short term, we are trying to be creative. We have this program called Innovative Employment Pathways, where we are bringing in returning citizens who've been previously incarcerated. We are honing in on people that are homeless. We are honing in on women. We are honing in on bus drivers. We're also kind of thinking about what about the CDL retirees who have a healthy pension, but a long life, allows them to work part-time for us. So we're trying to be very creative about those kinds of things. In the midterm, everybody's thinking about partnering with a CDL school. We're also thinking about building our own. So we have a learning function. We have 2 training centers with tracks. We just recently certified our Florida Training Center to provide CDL certifications on site, so we can take non-CDL individuals into our training center and certify them. We're going to do that in Arizona in August. So how can we build our own talent? That's what we are looking at in the midterm. And long term is how can we think about it on a macro level, right? I mean, how can we use government affairs and legislation? So I just had a conversation with Kathy's colleague at Waste Management, and we're talking about how about thinking about bringing mass immigration into the CDL pool? Like how can we create a requirement for CDL labor shortage and bring folks from outside of the states? Imagine the loyalty, imagine the stickiness, imagine the work ethic that we would experience. And that's something we can look at as an industry that goes around the waste industry, but also beyond. So those are some things that we're looking at, what are we doing right now? What are we doing midterm and then also long term?
All right. As you can see, we've got a lot of different and very unique and creative ways that people are trying to approach the labor shortages. The third question that we asked and we discussed on the panel was, I think you saw in the video clip at the beginning, and you'll have an opportunity to see at the end if you stay around, is that there really are invisible heroes that have been noticed and appreciated by our customers. The waste and recycling industry companies, along with our equipment manufacturer partners, were deemed an essential business that kept our country moving. I expect many of you out there have your own stories about how your service was validated in a real positive and rewarding light during 2020. Do you believe that it elevated your customer appreciation? And if so, how? I think, Sue, you had some points you wanted to share on that.
Yeah, absolutely. At Waste Connections, there was a core group of us at the corporate office, a very small group that decided safely we needed to be in the office every day so that we could collaborate and make sure we were making quick decisions for our field. And I have a very clear memory of driving down some very empty streets to work every day at the beginning of the pandemic, looking over and seeing one of our trucks servicing a commercial account and thinking, this is so important that we do this well. It's so important that we take care of our folks. And look at this employee, might be dealing with illness, might be dealing with uncertainty out there, really taking care of our customers. So I have seen, and I know some of my colleagues are here, literally hundreds of thank yous, videos, pictures. You saw a few of them this morning. I think when you asked for these, I probably sent like 60 of them in of our own. It's incredibly rewarding to know that when people started working from home, they looked out the window and saw their residential driver and said, that part of my life is normal. Our CEO used the term normalcy. Our industry helped provide residents a sense of normalcy. And I think, our challenge now is how do you take that goodwill? Because we have goodwill from the customer base. We have incredible goodwill from our employees who, they had spouses losing jobs. They had spouses getting benefit cuts, and we were there. So we've had an outpouring of support and thanks from our employees as well. How do we build on that and highlight the industry in a different way?
Absolutely. And I know, Heather, we chatted a little bit about this too this morning. Why don't you go ahead and share some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that, at ESG, we felt an incredible amount of responsibility just to have continuity for our team members, for our customers, for the communities that all of you serve. And I would say that, all of you probably feel the same way. We had, a great opportunity for our team members. We have on-site clinics, just as an example. And so we filed really quickly to try to get vaccines, to try to get them for our employees. Well, we found out that there was a chassis manufacturer in Alabama, because our Heil facility, as many of you know, is in Fort Payne, Alabama. They couldn't get vaccines. And so we tried to get more vaccines so that we could give it to the chassis manufacturer. That wasn't really something that we had to do, but we really did feel like we were all in this together to try to keep people moving and operating in our industry going. We did lots of things in the community, which I felt like our team members really appreciated. We started printing 3D, masks with our 3D printers at our Heil facility. So, there really was a sense of community in our industry, and I think people started to see that. It was bigger than just one of us. It was bigger than just being a dealer or hauler or, a service and product manufacturer. We really, I think, were highlighted that without us, the world would be a much different place. And I think everyone realized that during the pandemic.
And I'm sure all of you out there have your own stories, and maybe you'll share them when we finish up the panel. The next question, I think, is also very key as we look at employee outlook, and that is a generational workforce. In 2008, that economic downturn that hit the nation and the tendency for people to live longer and healthier lives than ever before, both have contributed to a preference for employees to choose to stay in their workplace longer, delaying their retirement. This trend has resulted in a new phenomenon, more generations in the workplace. Today, many workplaces are composed of 4 or 5 generations. These employees experience varying perspectives, work tendencies, and motivations. Can you share some examples of the strategies for attracting, managing, and retaining employees, recognizing that there really are generational traits? And I think, Sue, you wanted to start that discussion.
Yeah, thanks. So we are actually dealing primarily with 4 generations of employees at Waste Connections. We're about 20% baby boomers. My son likes to tell me I'm in that category, although I'm not there, but that's okay. He's 21 and he knows best. So we have about 40% of our workforce are Gen X, and about 36% are Gen Y or millennials, which, by the way, are not that young anymore, I'm just going to say. And we only have 4% Gen Z, which is the newest group of employees, Gen Z, that's coming into the workforce. But look, our future lies there with these Gen Z employees. So actually, back in 2019, before the pandemic, we were hearing from our managers out in the field that they were really struggling. How do I coach? How do I motivate when I've got this really diverse group of employees in my organization? So we actually engaged an outside expert. His name is Jason Dorsey. You can look him up. He and his team have done some deep research on the differences between the generation and helped our leaders learn more about how to coach, how to motivate, what the differences are. So that was one of the ways we wanted to help our leadership team deal with the differences. In addition to that, we have really focused on engaging with employees through technology. We just launched a Facebook product called Workplace. In fact, Michelle Little's in the audience here who's been leading that effort. It is our internal social media platform now. It's very difficult to connect 19,000 employees to the purpose of the organization if you can't reach them. And it's an absolute game changer. It is going to change, I think, how we can share why we do what we do, how we do what we do, highlight our ESG efforts so employees understand what our commitments are and what our overall purpose that they come to work every day. So that was one of the outcomes of the generational differences. And then again, just like Shweta talked about, we're looking at how do we expand the well-being, financial well-being, emotional well-being. We have a lot of efforts right now to figure out how to do that well with a frontline workforce that can sometimes be difficult to reach. And I'd say finally, on the flip side of the generation issue, I think we do have to be cautious. Gallup uses this term called individualized respect. It's one of the traps you can fall into as a leader is going, well, like my son, she's a boomer. She's not going to know how to use her phone, or this is a millennial. And everyone has a different set of needs. So I think we can understand the generational differences. But what we've told our leaders is you need to have that close relationship with your employees and really understand their individual needs. Be careful not to stereotype too much into the generations.
Thank you. As a baby boomer speaking, I do know how to use my phone, though. But that, in all sincerity, I think you bring up some excellent points, and I think, Amanda, you wanted to tag on to that.
Yeah, I mean, I love Sue's points, and I think you're going to see some commonality, certainly in McNeilus, trying to leverage technology, trying to leverage purpose. I think one of the more interesting things that we've done, and McNeilus is part of a bigger parent company. We kind of mentioned some of the other groups that are a part of that. But at the Oshkosh Corporation, we've actually put a lot of emphasis on employee resource business groups, to try to help increase diversity. And one of the starting groups was a Young Professionals Network. And so we've got a Young Professionals Network that allows our young professionals to kind of get together. They do a lot of professional development activities. They do a lot of community activities. And what's interesting about that is other folks from other generations looked to that group and said, hey, I would like to be a part of a group like that. So we are in the process of launching what we're calling an intergenerational group, which will be probably targeted a little bit more towards those further along in their career, doing some of the similar types of professional development, community service, like that type of thing. And I think there's already been some desire for those two groups to partner up and work on mentoring and reverse mentoring. So I think that's an innovative way to really, meet everybody where they're at and address those different needs across the generations.
I think that's, and Shweta, I know you were talking recently about how us in waste management, we really are working towards trying to help others, and we have some of those other professional groups that we're working along with.
Yeah, I mean, employee resource groups can be a great place for people to feel like they belong. And sometimes when you're across different generations, you're looking for a sense of belonging. I have to say, Sue's point is so bang on. It's the individualized respect. I'll give you an example. When I was serving in a D&I role in my past life, every conversation was around, millennials, all they care about is the next promotion, and they want to spend 2 minutes in a job and they want the next promotion. If you really dig deep, it's not so much about the title. The research has suggested it's really about growth and development. It's really about feeling challenged. This is not a generation that will start in a job and stay in the same job for 30 years. And it's not because of lack of loyalty. It's really because they want to be challenged, they want to make a difference, and they want to grow. So it's those kinds of things. If you kind of go beyond the stereotypical notions of the generations and dig deep and identify what the true motivators are, create an environment of belonging, create an environment where everybody can thrive, and build that culture, that's what's going to move us forward, as opposed to saying, this is important to baby boomers, this is important to Gen X, this is important to millennials, etc. So I think looking at it holistically and doing a double or a triple click below that, and then building groups and sense of belonging there, that's what's going to drive engagement.
I think that leads, once you understand the different generations and respect them individually, I think that leads you to, what is your workplace culture? Positive workplace culture attracts talent, drives engagement, impacts happiness and satisfaction, and affects performance. The personality of your business is influenced by everything. Furthermore, continuously reviewing and flexing your company's brand is one of the most vital responsibilities you manage. Why do you believe this responsibility is essential to your company and the waste and recycling industry? And tell us about how you are approaching crucial needs within your team. And I think, Shweta, you wanted to start on this one.
Sure, so I'm very passionate about this area.
I know.
And let's just be honest, after a child is about maybe 7 or 8 years old, nobody grows up saying, I want to be in the trash industry, right? Like, it's not an attractive or a sexy industry to get into. And so I think as we were thinking about our workplace culture and how do we attract and retain our employees, we were thinking about what the value proposition is for employees in a holistic way. And so what is our employer value proposition? And so we kind of created this framework which we call the 6 C's. And the 6 C's stand for compensation, because you want to be paid and you want to be paid well. Culture, which has to be critical and has to create an environment where you can thrive. Colleagues, because we are your family outside of your family and we spend more time with each other than we do our real families. Then there is contributions. We are a waste company, so we're contributing to the environment, we're contributing to the society. Content, which is how are you feeling good about your job and what you do. And then career, so that you're growing. So when we think about building a framework around the 6 C's, a true value of a WM job goes beyond the paycheck that you take home. And so as we think about that, we've done some amazing things because we have now been able to strategize around how we offer our employees a great environment to sustain and thrive. And the one thing I'll really talk about, which we're just so excited about, for the first time we're leading the industry in offering no-cost education for employees and their dependents. And this is big because we want to get families involved. We want the connection and the loyalty with not just the employee, but the families. So we have 130 programs that include eCornell, Purdue University, Texas A&M, lots of great universities where not only can our employees get education, further themselves, get certifications, get college degrees, GEDs, but so can our employees' dependents, children, spouses, and that kind of creates a pull into us. So we are more than just a trash company that's offering you a job and a pay. We're trying to create a culture where you feel connected with us, where you feel like your family is involved with us. And that's how we're kind of doing it with our safety, with our holistic well-being, family well-being, and partnership with Guild, who offers no-cost education to our employees and their dependents.
And I've heard, as many of you know, I've been in the industry a long time. That mantra of family has been so critical to the foundation of how we in the waste industry see ourselves. So I think that well-being is a very important function, I think, for each of our companies. And I think, Amanda, you wanted to talk a little bit about that also.
Yeah, so it's really actually, what's kind of cool about this is there's so many similarities between us. So that's what I think for all of us. So you're certainly going to get some themes here. We have a similar employee value proposition. We only have 3 items on ours. We don't have 6. So ours is a little bit more simplified, but well-being is one. So that's clearly a theme, and looking at whole self well-being. How are we taking care of our employees? How are they taking care of their families, safety, et cetera? Also growth. So people want growth in their careers. They want growth. They want development. Obviously, some big themes for us. And then this sense of purpose. So certainly been a reoccurring theme. As part of Oshkosh, we serve a lot of different customers, and certainly McNeilus serving in the waste and recycling is a huge sense of purpose for our team members. So really very similar, trying to hit employees at all of those different levels and really making them feel connected to the company. I think that's the big takeaway that we're all trying to drive at.
I think that's very true, and I think our last question really builds on that workplace culture, and that is, how are you going to build the talent pools that all of us need to run our businesses? Talent pools could be the most effective recruiting tactic and the keys to hiring top talent in today's competitive market. Industry research reports that building talent pools and pipelines will be the biggest priority for our companies. Has your organization begun exploring and building new talent pools to meet the critical demand? And how are you evolving your workforce development tactic to meet the new, unique talent pool that you are going to need? And I know Amanda wanted to share points on that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one I feel really, I'm really proud of. So one of the things that we did for us, one of our big shortages is on welders, a skilled trade. And so we've had to get really innovative about how we attract and retain welders. And one thing we did was actually partner with the state of Minnesota to build out a training program. And that allowed us to recruit really anybody to become a welder. It's a very robust training program, book learning, on-the-job learning, and at the end of the training program, you are a certified welder. And what we saw with lowering the barrier to entry, kind of like Heather talked about, just letting anyone think they could be a welder, we saw a lot of women come into that program, which is something that historically has been really challenging for us to actually recruit experienced female welders. So that program with no cost, no barrier to entry, really anyone from any background could come into and be successful at, has been a game changer. And so much so we're replicating that with some of the other difficult skills. Painters are really hard for us, so we're replicating that model to bring more, just anyone, but it's had a really positive effect from a diversity perspective.
I think, and Heather, I think you were chatting this morning that your talent pool is really broader now. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll talk about our Heil facility in Fort Payne. And one of the things we noticed about the demographics of the Fort Payne area is it's about 25% Latino and Hispanic. And what we noticed is our population was only around 8% Hispanic at the Heil facility. So we really started asking some questions from the team members that we already have there, saying, why are we not able to tap into this group in the community? And it was really two main reasons. Number one, they were not confident in their English. And so they did not want to come to an interview for fear that they were going to be embarrassed, they wouldn't understand. So we actually started doing advertisements in Spanish. We started having bilingual interviews. We now have team members, one per line, that can speak Spanish. So when we have those new team members, if they're not comfortable with their English, then they can actually feel comfortable that there's someone they can talk to help understand. We have had it skyrocket. I mean, we've had so many applications from that Hispanic and Latino population over the last month. It's just been absolutely amazing. And I would say too, if you think about like our Veterans Network, that's something that we started last year too. And at Heil and at our Marathon facility, we have a big percentage of veteran workers, and they love the industry, they love the work that they do. And so we started saying, okay, how do we tap into that? So we asked all the veterans, and we have a network, we meet with them regularly. How can we reach all those individuals that you know, and how can we get them to come? And before COVID, we were hoping to do this experience where they would come on site and we would host a lot of people for the day and let them get to know the areas. Hadn't been able to do that with COVID, but we've definitely had our virtual networks and have been able to provide some services for those veterans, and have also seen the applications for that group skyrocket as well. So it's when you start thinking about talent pools, it's things that you wouldn't normally think about. And again, from a demographic perspective, I really didn't know that we were so underrepresented, and we needed to find a way to make people feel like they could come and apply. And I forgot to mention too, with the Latino and Hispanic population, many of them do not have their high school diploma or GED. And so one of the things we talk to some of our team members about is, listen, they can come and do a work keys assessment. and that will allow them to be able to be employed with us. So we've started seeing the applications skyrocket with that, and it's been just an amazing thing to see because it's families. I think some of you have been talking about that too. We want the whole family there. We have parents and grandparents and people that have been working in our industry for a really long time and love it. So the more the merrier. We're all about families.
What are some of the development tactics that you're now using to help develop the employees along with building that talent pool?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's a couple of things. I mean, there's internal talent, certainly. So we've got a lot of frontline individuals that they want to go into leadership roles, and maybe they don't have the background. They don't have the training. They haven't been to management trainings and things of that nature. So we created Leadership Boot Camp. And it's actually 6 weeks of curriculum, and anyone can go through that program that wants to be a part of it, and they can complete it. It's self-paced, so they can do it as they want to. And we let them go through the program, and when they finish, they might want to be a team lead. They might want to go into a manager type role. It actually gives them a lot of the basic training that you need to be a good leader. And I would say that that's just one of the examples we have.
Great. Well, that brings me to the end of the questions that we have prepared to discuss this afternoon, because it is now this afternoon. But we still have time left in our session here today, and we'd really love to encourage the audience members to, ask questions. And I think, Peggy, we have some folks with microphones, and Katie. So just raise your hand or stand up. We'll get a microphone to you where you can hopefully ask some of these very talented women up here some of the things that are really burning you'd like to know more about.
Thank you, and thank you guys for being here. Phenomenal job. You guys spoke about cross-generational, of the different generations. As you're trying to attract talent of all those different generations, have you seen a shift in the employment package that they're looking for, whether it be benefits or pay? Are you seeing a shift from generation to generation?
I can start. I think one of the things that we're trying to tackle right now is, and I'm not so sure it's about generation versus age. I'm just going to say, right, when you're early in your career, we have a very comprehensive compensation package for our professional employees, and a lot of that's based on equity in the company, which has treated us all very well over the years. But when you are trying to raise a young family, pay your bills, we're looking at how do we shift the mix of the types of compensation that we provide so that we get that retention along the way, but we're really helping people feel better about their day-to-day expenses and bills and compensation. So that's one of the things we're working on right now.
I would agree with that, but I would add to the point that the way that you reach this population is a little different. So I'm not a Snapchat or a TikTok user, but what we've found is we've actually tried to start doing a lot of advertisements on Snapchat and TikTok. So my daughters are trying to educate me, but we have people that know how to use this that actually do those advertisements for us. But I mean, those are the kind of things that I wouldn't have thought about initially, but just reaching the population is one. And then when you get them there, many of them are in a different situation than maybe we were when we started our career. So you have folks that, again, they might be single parents. Well, that flexibility is going to be way more important than the pay, to your question. So are you going to offer part-time work or part-time options? Or is your attendance policy actually reflective of the fact that you're saying you want to be, inclusive of people that, again, might need to be part-time or might need to have a schedule shift because of their personal situation, whether they're a new parent or, again, they're caring for elderly parents that are in the home, or maybe even both. So those are the types of things I think that are becoming more and more important with our workforce.
I have a question. Since I've got the mic, I'm going to ask. What role do internships play in your recruitment of key personnel and hopefully developing them into careers? I know that the Women's Council put together a free download for our internship, how to start internship programs, and internship toolkit, but have you seen some success with these programs, and are they paid? Do you work with universities or high schools? How do they work with your groups?
I can take that one. We see both apprenticeships as well as internships for McNeilis. So apprenticeships would be more focused on our production environment, trying to bring in high school students. We partner with a lot of local high schools and local technical schools, bring in those apprentices. Yes, they are paid. We try to really highlight what type of career you can have in manufacturing. And then on the office side, of course, internships are a vital source of talent for us. We're going to see those more in engineering, in IT, finance, HR, kind of some of the traditional functional areas, as well as all of the areas supporting manufacturing. We would go do a lot of recruiting in colleges, bring them in for the summer, and hopefully convert them to full-time hires at the end of the internship. So that's a huge talent pool for us.
So I can add on. So apart from everything Amanda has just said, we're also looking at infiltrating talent at different phases in their life, right? So if you think about the leadership pipeline, you start off by leading yourself as an individual contributor, then you manage others, then you manage managers, then you manage leaders, right, or a function. So the way we are approaching infiltration of the talent and development framework is meeting them where they're at in their phase. So we are getting in entry-level or internship talent. And let's just be honest, if the point of you getting interns and apprentices is to build a long-term talent pool, build an employer brand, let's pay them. If you're looking for cheap labor or free labor, that's a different ask, right? And not to say one is wrong or right or good or bad, it's just our intent to bring entry-level internship talent is to build a talent pipeline. So we're actually also bringing in people 3, 4, 5 years after they have completed college into what we call our WMW coach program, so business optimization, where they have rotational programs for 2 years and they can accelerate their leadership journey and skip 3 to 5 years. So we're kind of thinking about how do we insert talent through programs at different levels in the leadership pipeline.
Sort of build on one of the previous questions. So you've talked about different generations maybe have different needs for compensation packages. And I think maybe we all recognize that and understand that. How do you approach that in a union environment when you're trying to negotiate a contract? And how do you get the union to consider, being creative in their approach?
I'll attempt that question. I think that is really hard. That is just really hard. What we have started to see, while our labor activity and organization activity has kind of gone up post-pandemic, there's also this real appetite to think outside the box. Where we have, based on everything we are doing with the value of a WM job, with the 6 C's, there are actually individuals in our front line that are saying, I feel like I'm better off outside of the union. And so some of our union folks are starting to think creatively, starting to break some of those strong barriers, starting to see things like pension may not be the most important criteria for somebody that's in their early 20s and is not thinking about staying in the same job for 45 years. So they're starting to see that, and we're starting to open up the aperture a little bit. I think it's going to be a slow process, but it's really showing them what the art of the possible is and how we can be more creative and be mutually beneficial as opposed to thinking about it in a singular way. And for us, some of our union facilities are starting to see that, where as we are attracting candidates through our value of a WM job, through them, for example, our no-cost education partnership is not available for our union employees. So people don't want to be in the union because they want to avail our benefits. So it's really showing them what the art of the possible is and slowly, kind of chipping away at it.
And don't you think, even without that perspective, some of the things you've talked about, the culture today,
Yes.
as well as the well-being of the employee, regardless if you're in a union or not, that culture and well-being focus is still present, isn't it not?
Absolutely. And sometimes based on what the union contract says, even though we may want to offer certain things, it does not allow us to, because we can't break those boundaries. So again, you're absolutely right, Kathy. If we can give them a peek into what could be, then I think we can creatively expand and open up the aperture for union facilities as well.
Hello, I'm Stephanie from Waste 360. Thank you so much. It's so nice to see everybody in person finally.
Agreed.
But I wrote about occupational health and safety for 6 years, and the line between EHS and HR, there was a more clear line before, and as time went on, especially with the pandemic, that line has become more blurred and crossed. So where do you see that relationship going in the future, and with employees and candidates more concerned about safety and having it, more, I believe, more at the top of their list of what's going to go on as we go post-COVID? Where do you see that relationship go in the future, and not only with communicating to employees, but to attracting talent?
I can start. I can tell you at Waste Connections, when I started, the HR and safety groups were combined. We were part of the same organization structure. Many years ago, we really wanted safety to become ingrained in our operational, day-to-day operations, rather than being a separate department that you go to for help when you have a safety issue. We wanted that every leader and every employee to be focused on safety, so we made that change. But I can tell you through this pandemic, our director, our VP of safety and we spent all of our time together working collaboratively to come up with the right protocols. Because you're right, it's not about just trucks and backing. This was about illness and keeping people safe and finding ways to keep the work going and make people feel comfortable that they could do that and stay well. So we are in two separate groups, but we work extremely closely together.
I have another question. Did somebody else want to add on to that?
I'll just say, I think when, the topic of safety is being talked very differently post-pandemic than it was, right? So the mental health, the physical safety are now kind of being talked as equally important versus, we don't want to talk about the mental health piece. So I think just by the mere function of that happening, it's integrated now. I used to always, I say this, instead of respectfully cooperating with each other, we have to actively collaborate with each other, So I think it's just by the mere function of how things have transpired over the last year, they have naturally integrated from my perspective.
And I just wanted to add one. I thought that's a really insightful question. One of just an interesting byproduct, and I don't know if it was shared across, but we actually saw during the pandemic, with so much focus on COVID, the pandemic, caring for our people, we actually saw an improvement in a lot of our safety metrics. So I think it's a good reflection for us all to think about what were some of those behaviors we were doing during the pandemic that led to that, and hopefully those are some things that we can continue on despite how terrible the pandemic was. That's a positive byproduct of it, at least in our experience.
I think all of us individually, with our families and our own experiences, I think while the pandemic was certainly challenging, it was unnormal for all of us to act the way we had to act, it did provide us some very positive experiences that maybe we would not have achieved. And I think you're a demonstration of how health and safety, as well as human resources, really got together and worked very collaboratively. Other questions out there?
Heather, you brought up a really good point about the language barriers in some of your areas. And I think I read somewhere that even the Olympics are being challenged. Are any of you using translation apps to work with employees? And is this something that you see coming down the pipe?
We actually haven't used translation apps yet because, again, we have individuals, and actually I hired a person in our Fort Payne facility on second shift that's bilingual, and I think we've started seeing that too, is there's a dialect of things that Google Translate isn't going to actually capture. And I think depending on where you are in the country, it's just like, I talk very Southern, as if you all can't tell that. Depending on where you go, there's dialects to all different types of languages. So we've tried to use our team members to say, please write this for us in a way that's going to make sense for the individuals that live in this area versus using translation apps, because we've just found that to be more helpful.
I agree. We haven't used any apps, but, and again, our workplace platform that we just rolled out to share what we're doing with employees and for employees to share translates into multiple languages. So that was another advantage. It can instantly help an employee who doesn't speak English know exactly what's going on. So that's been really helpful.
And I would say, Shweta, we have an app too called WM Now, and it does the same thing, depending if you're French or you need it in Spanish, so that's available also.
Yes, so we have a pretty large scope of business in Canada, and by law there, if there's any kind of communication that goes enterprise-wide in English, it has to go in French Canadian. Mm-hmm. So it's like we cannot think about doing any enterprise-wide communication without that as a concept. So we actually have an app now which has our health screening, access to benefits, access to guild education, all of that. But it allows you to get your resources in either French Canadian or Spanish, and that's kind of how we access it. So it's not so much a translation app. All the translation is done on the back end, and those resources are made available through our intranet app so that you can get access. And we found exactly the same thing when we've used apps in the past. It just doesn't translate what we're specifically saying. So we actually use translation services as opposed to apps. And that's where we've gotten the most value out of our bilingual or multiple languages that we reach.
You need the human touch.
Yeah.
I'll put a plug in for the Women's Council. There's a free download through our website that it's Where Does My Garbage Go coloring book, and it's in English and in Spanish. So if you want to see where your garbage goes, and you don't know that about your industry, you can download that and hand them out to your tours. But it's a good idea to think about other languages to put that in as well. Any other questions from our group out here? Okay.
I'm loud. Okay. With all these different ESG groups like D&I, how are you reaching your front line and showing them that those are resources and groups?
We've struggled with that a little bit because especially in our plant populations, being able to pull them off the plant floor to actually participate has been difficult. We actually held a session last week that was one of our most popular. And again, we just started the Hispanic and Latino network, but we had them actually our HR business partners at the site go out and just make sure all the team members know that. We use a Remind app so we can send notifications out to team members. We actually had our HR reps going out and saying, listen, if you want to come to this, here's the time, here's the place. And so we had the individuals in our plants go in a room, social distanced, as we're still in the pandemic at this point, but then everyone else was virtual. So it was like a combo. So you had people from our soft pack business, you had people from Third Eye in Austin, we had people from Heil and Marathon. I mean, it was fantastic. So there's a grassroots approach, I think, to get to the front line on that, but we also use the Remind app to try to reach people and just let them know things that are happening in the company.
So I can follow on that, but it's really hard to reach your frontline employees, right? And so the approach we're taking from an IE&D perspective at Waste Management is that we are embedding it into how we show up and how we work. So it's not just using it as a pillar, having initiatives on the side, but how do we embed it? So we are incorporating it in our performance management process, for example. We are incorporating it in our talent review process. So when we talk about these managers who are going to be future leaders, we're holding them accountable. Tell us about their teams. Are they diverse? Are they inclusive? Let's talk about what kind of promotions we have seen in them. And if we see only certain kind of promotions, then we say, okay, this person cannot be considered on the career leadership pipeline because they haven't shown how they can be diverse and inclusive with their teams. So we're kind of embedding it into how we do work. We're kind of building in consequences and accountability at that level versus, I shouldn't say versus, in addition to making sure that our managers allow time and space and capacity for our frontline employees to engage. The thing is, when somebody has done a job for 20 years and have constantly been rewarded for doing it well, they only know how to do it that way. And now what we're doing is we're changing the system on them. We're asking hockey players to now play football. And the athleticism, may be similar, but now we're not just saying, you're accountable for this, but let us teach you how to do it well. So that's how we're reaching the front line. It's a long play, it's not going to happen overnight, but the long play is that we teach our leaders to be inclusive leaders. We create processes and systems, benefit offerings that are embedded into how we show up and how we do work, in addition to having business impact groups, employee resource groups, and creating that capacity and space to do that.
We spend a lot of time, energy, policies geared towards all of our employees, but specifically our frontline. And this time, during this pandemic, we have counted upon our tier level managers and supervisors to do a whole lot. So I'm asking you, what have you done creatively, absent bonuses and things like that, to retain even them, to encourage them, to engage them, not just make them responsible, accountable to all that we do every day, to get it out there, develop it, process it, implement it, make it happen. What are you doing for that level of management?
I guess I can say honestly, we didn't really have to approach our supervisor and management group differently with COVID because we had invested in servant leadership for so many years. We've been educating, we've been training, we've been coaching, we've been asking them to serve their teams. So for us, I felt like it was this moment where everything you've been working on, you've got that foundation. And frankly, our supervisor team, we have very low turnover in supervisors and managers. And I think they saw COVID as difficult as it was. I can step up now and take care of my team. This is what I've been trained to do. And we've had just phenomenal responses from our team. So I can't say, other than giving them some guidance and helping them learn about how to deal with COVID, that we really had to do much differently with COVID than we did before.
Yeah. I'd say we see our frontline supervisors and leaders as frontline. So we see them as frontline. So whatever we do to our frontline, they're kind of part of that stakeholder group or audience. But also what we are investing in is frontline leadership development. You talked about the boot camp. And most of our leaders have been through that. What we're doing differently now is creating a program where we are incorporating social learning. What would be a 6-week curriculum-based program, we are spreading over 24 weeks. Because what we do is we'll do the curriculum for 90 minutes or 2 hours and give them 3 weeks to practice it. And in between, we teach their managers, so we're engaging managers of managers on the next topic, so those behaviors are reinforced. So it's not just going to a classroom. I don't know about you, unless I'm interested in the topic, I probably retain 10 to 20% of the classroom. So we're kind of creating those practice mechanisms. And we are embedding our 6 C's in the education. We are embedding how to lead inclusively with equitable representation into those sessions. And what they get to do is, after each session, they get to go practice. We've created we have Yammer, so we use Yammer so they can, share online. Hey, I got to practice this skill today and it didn't quite work. Has somebody else done it? And then the social learning comes in where somebody else says, well, I tried it this way, have you considered it? And so they're teaching each other. And that's kind of growing themselves beyond just a curriculum base. Because I think the curriculum is absolutely critical, and we need to have a singular way of thinking about it, or a consistent way rather. But embedding the 6 C's into our learning and getting them to practice and engaging the managers of managers, it's what's helping us get more traction.
I just want to mention one quick thing on that. So I like that approach. I would say that from a more simple perspective, we just needed them to take time off. Quite frankly,
so
I mean,
true.
over the last year, they were kind of in fight or flight mode. And so it's like everybody felt like they had to be working 24/7. The people that were left, we couldn't let anybody down. And now it's like no one they feel bad if they take off because they think they're putting a burden on someone else. And so we've tried to say, you have to go take a break. I mean, you just have to. And so encouraging those leaders to say, listen, you have worked hard for a year. It's going to be okay. Yes, it might cause someone else to work hard for a little bit, but you've got to have time to decompress. And that's been really difficult for us to get them to take their time off. But I would say anything you can do to push that, they need it right now.
That is so key. You're absolutely right. We also noticed that post-pandemic, the amount of administrative burden on frontline supervisors have increased significantly. So we are even considering creating a coordinator role for our frontline supervisors that lifts and shifts all that administrative burden so they can focus on leading.
Yeah.
They can focus on managing. So it's it's something we're looking at, not there yet. But we have to, you're so right about them just taking a beat, just taking a break, because they've been going nonstop.
Thank you for all the info, very insightful. So from a smaller business standpoint, all the things that we're talking about are all about resources, whether it's time, whether it's money, effort. How do you prioritize? How do you, from a company that doesn't have, endless resources that we can create positions or do that type of thing, how do you start? What do you look at first? And again, what do you prioritize on top of the initiatives list?
So I can start. So these are lessons I've learned from my previous life, and we apply them here. But you've probably heard of the 80-20 principle, right? The Pareto principle, 20% brings you 80% of the value. And I think you've gotten lots of ideas today, and you're constrained on resources, budgets, financials. And so I just do 80-20 analysis. What are the 20% of the things that I can do within my sphere of influence that bring 80% of the value? Because we're not going to be able to check every box. And that's kind of how we prioritize. So the simple thing like the Frontline Leadership Development Program that we just talked about, in an ideal world, you would start at the top and then trickle down the lessons of leadership, servant leadership, or things like that. We didn't have the ability to do that in a short period of time. So we said, where is the critical point of intervention? Where is the inflection point? And where it's going to bring the maximum value? And we found that the inflection point was the frontline leadership and engaging the managers of managers. And that's how we prioritize. But it's really about finding what will bring the maximum value and what is in your sphere of control, and then doing that analysis.
And isn't it part of, I think each of you today have said, in my perspective, it's really creating that culture, that family that you have. I don't care if you have 4 drivers or 50,000 employees. I think you have to make your employees feel that you care for them, they're important to you, and it's the basic culture of who you are in your company. Would you agree, ladies?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say ask your employees what's important to them and start there. They'll tell you.
And especially if they're women, they're going to tell you.
Yeah.
I think, any more questions? I think we're good. 10 minutes early, but I do appreciate all of you have stayed. Hopefully you have found some great ideas to take back. And we very much appreciate that you joined us today. And I think we do have, if you want to stay around and see the video one more time, or if you want to come up and just talk individually to any of these fine people, please do so. Again, thank you on behalf of the Women's Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy.